I only have one message to give you. I don't care what you think of me. I don't care what you call me. I do care what you do with this information because it is important to our survival as a species.
Federal officials this year have arrested or detained nearly 200 Israeli citizens suspected of belonging to a, quote, organized intelligence gathering operation.
Mossad informed the FBI and CIA in August 2001 that, based on its intelligence, as many as 200 terrorists were slipping into the United States and planning a major assault on the United States. The Israeli intelligence agency cautioned the FBI that it had picked up indications of a large-scale target in the United States and that Americans would be very vulnerable. However, it is not known whether U.S. authorities thought the warning to be credible or whether it contained enough details to allow counterterrorism teams to come up with a response. A month later, terrorists struck at the World Trade Center and the Pentagon in the largest terrorist attack in history.
The Bush administration has deported most of those arrested after September 11th, although some are in custody under the new anti-terrorism law. Cameron also described an investigation into the possibility that an Israeli firm generated billing data that could be used for intelligence purposes, and described concerns that the federal government's own wiretapping system may be vulnerable. Tonight, in part 4 of the series, we'll learn about the improbable roots of the probe, a drug case that went bad 4 years ago in L.A.
Los Angeles, 1997. A major local, state, and federal drug investigation sours. The suspects? Israeli organized crime, with operations in New York, Miami, Las Vegas, Canada, Israel, and Egypt. The allegations? Cocaine and ecstasy trafficking and sophisticated white-collar credit card and computer fraud. The problem? According to classified law enforcement documents obtained by Fox News, the bad guys had the cops' beepers, cell phones, even home phones under surveillance. Some who did get caught admitted to having hundreds of numbers and using them to avoid arrest. Quote, this compromised law enforcement communications between LAPD detectives and other assigned law enforcement officers working various aspects of the case. The organization discovered communications between Organized Crime Intelligence Division detectives, the FBI, and the Secret Service. Shock spread from the DEA to the FBI in Washington and then the CIA. An investigation of the problem, according to law enforcement documents, concluded, quote, the organization has apparent extensive access to database systems to identify pertinent personal and biographical information. When investigators tried to find out where the information might have come from, they looked at Amdocs, a publicly traded firm based in Israel. Amdocs generates billing data for virtually every call in America, and they do credit checks. The company denies any leaks, but investigators still fear that the firm's data is getting into the wrong hands. When investigators checked their own wiretapping system for leaks, they grew concerned about potential vulnerabilities in the computers that intercept, record, and store the wiretapped calls. A main contractor is Comverse Infosys, which works closely with the Israeli government and under a special grant program is reimbursed for up to 50% of its research and development costs by Israel's Ministry of Industry and Trade. Asked this week about another sprawling investigation and the detention of 60 Israelis since September 11th, the Bush administration treated the questions like hot potatoes.
I would just refer you to the Department of Justice with it. I'm not familiar with the report.
I'm aware that some Israeli citizens have been detained. With respect to why they are being detained and the other aspects of your question, whether it's because they are in intelligence services or what they were doing, I will defer to the Department of Justice and the FBI to answer that.
Beyond the 60 apprehended or detained and many deported since September 11th, another group of 140 Israeli individuals have been arrested and detained in this year in what government documents describe as, quote, an organized intelligence gathering operation designed to, quote, penetrate government facilities. Most of those individuals said they had served in the Israeli military, which is compulsory there, but they also had, most of them, intelligence expertise and either worked for Amdocs or other companies in Israel that specialize in wiretapping. Earlier this week, the Israeli embassy here in Washington denied any spying against or in the United States. Tony?
All right, I've covered the Israeli art student mystery in a live stream video. If you haven't checked that out, please do. I was reading an article from Salon, May 7th, 2002. In January 2001, the security branch of the US DEA began to receive a number of peculiar reports from DEA field offices across the country. According to the reports, young Israelis claiming to be art students and offering artwork for sale had been attempting to penetrate DEA offices for over a year. The Israelis had also attempted to penetrate the offices of other law enforcement and Department of Defense agencies. Strangest of all, the students had visited the homes of numerous DEA officers and other senior federal officials. As a pattern slowly emerged, the DEA appeared to have been targeted in what is called an organized intelligence gathering activity, but to what end and for whom no one knew. Reports of the mysterious Israelis with an inexplicable interest in peddling art to G-men came in from more than 40 U.S. cities and continued throughout the first 6 months of 2001. Agents of the DEA, ATF, Air Force, Secret Service, FBI, and U.S. Marshals documented some 130 separate incidents of art student encounters. Some of the Israelis were observed diagramming the inside of federal buildings. Some were found carrying photographs they had taken of federal agents. One was discovered with a computer printout in his luggage that referred to DEA groups. In some cases, the Israelis visited locations not known to the public, areas without street addresses, for example, or DEA offices not identified as such, leading authorities to suspect that information had been gathered from prior surveillance or perhaps electronically from credit cards and other sources. One Israeli was discovered holding banking receipts for substantial amounts of money, close to $180,000 in withdrawals and deposits over a 2-month period. A number of the Israelis resided for a period of time in Hollywood, Florida, a small city where Mohammed Atta and 3 terrorist comrades lived for a time before September 11th. In March 2001, the Office of the National Counterintelligence Executive, a branch of the CIA, issued a heads-up to federal employees about suspicious visitors to federal facilities. The warning noted that employees have observed both male and females attempting to bypass facility security and enter federal buildings. Federal agents, the warning stated, had arrested 2 of the individuals for trespassing and discovered that the suspects possessed counterfeit work visas and green cards. In the wake of the bulletin, federal agents raised several other red flags, including an Air Force alert, a Federal Protective Services alert, an Office of National Drug Control Policy Security alert, and a request that the Immigration and Naturalization Services investigate a specific case. Officials began dealing more aggressively with the art students. According to one account, some 140 Israeli nationals were detained or arrested between March 2001 and September 11, 2001. Many of them were deported. According to the INS, the deportations resulted from violations of student visas that forbade the Israelis from working in the United States. In fact, Salon has established that none of the Israelis were enrolled in the art school most of them claimed to be attending. The other college they claimed to be enrolled in does not exist. After the September 11th attacks, many more young Israelis, 60, according to one AP dispatch and other reports, were detained and deported. Okay, so you're familiar with the Israeli art student phenomena and how it was being tracked by our government, especially the DEA. Here's a book published in 2004 entitled Size Matters, the Lower Manhattan Cultural Council's World Trade Center Artist Residency 1997 to 2001. From 1997 to 2001, over 140 artists set up studios in temporarily vacant spaces provided by the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey in the upper reaches of the World Trade Center's Tower 1. In an atmosphere of conceptual risk-taking, they produced a broad range of work from panoramic cityscapes and discrete sculptural objects to physically integrated site-specific projects and new media performance. The residency was initiated to serve emerging and mid-career artists and encourage conceptual and aesthetic experimentation. So this is a book going over that event. But the fact of the matter is, art students, supposedly from Austria, among other places, were granted unprecedented access to both the Twin Tower buildings for 4 years leading up to the attacks. That's a fact. You also have cases of hundreds of Israeli art students penetrating secure DEA facilities to, quote, sell art for 2 years leading up to the attacks.
stop at 30th Street. Oh, and then
If I could tie them together, you wouldn't mind you guys going?
whoever got his picture taken should put down his name so they can pick it up tomorrow.
Francie, do you have any film that I can have? Just one roll? Okay, we're there right now.
Our business is good.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks.
Yeah.
Together what?
Looks great. It's flashing.
I want to go to the North Face of Salvador. One facing Manhattan. They hang in front of the 91st floor for 10 minutes. So it's made as long as we can. And I guess the closest we can get is within 500 feet to hang in that range.
The building that we're going to do is the one with the tower on it. Facing the city?
Yeah. Facing Manhattan. It's going with West Broad. We're going to be communicating with walkie-talkies with one person inside on the 91st floor. He has a window set up that has lights, one of the windows. He's going to be individually putting people into that window, and we'll be taking pictures of those people. As many pictures as you can shoot in the time that you can allow us to be there.
Okay.
Okay, bye.
Right, that's right. But he's doing very good. He's one of our star pupils.
Pilgrim State Mental Hospital.
Inmates.
With friends like that, who needs enemies, right? Underneath your seat, there are life preservers. You just rip it open with these tabs, put it on, tie it around. Don't inflate it until you get out of the aircraft. In an emergency situation, your name is again? David. David and I would blow the emergency handles up here. David, that's just pulled off.
Okay.
You just pull it back and the whole door comes right off.
Okay.
You know what? I am just so glad to be considered an artist just for this next 20 minutes.
What you have to do is you have to line up once the helicopter's over here. And the first step in this window, get the picture taken, and you're gonna see, you're gonna hear if everything's okay. Then step away to the right side, leave it through this side over here, and the next one can enter. So that like as many as possible can get their picture taken. Okay? Next? Okay. Next. Okay.
So we have the Mossad, working in the United States, operating a spy ring, sending art students all over our country, gathering intelligence and penetrating secure facilities, as well as taking residence in the Twin Towers for 4 years leading up to the attacks. But did you know there were also other events involving Israel in 2001, such as 2 Israelis being detained and arrested with bombs in the Mexican Congress? Probably didn't hear about that, did you? As reported in Levox de Atzlan, 2 men posing as press photographers, one of them a former Israeli colonel and Mossad agent, were arrested inside the Mexican Congress on October 10, 2001. Armed with 9mm pistols, grenades, explosives, detonators, and bullets, they were released following intense pressure from the Israeli embassy. And this is actually a screenshot of the newspaper that originally published it. Now, this is based on the same article, but this is from another site. The reason all the foregoing was necessary is to establish why agents of the Israeli Mossad would target the Mexican Congress. The U.S. war against Iraq had nothing to do with protecting America and everything to do with advancing the Israeli Zionist agenda. So when Mexico refused to support the United States' push for war in the United Nations, this was an affront, not to the United States, but to Israel. Thus, it would be Israel who worked behind the scenes to bring Mexico into line with the plans of Zionist think tanks that were implemented by the United States, but conceived in Israel. And this is where we come to the gigantic memory hole. An anonymous poster on Gab called my attention to an incident in Mexico on October 10th, 2001. This incident involved 2 Israelis, Saar Noam Ben-Zvi and Salvador Guersson Smeck, arrested in the Mexican Congress. At the time of their arrest, they had dynamite, detonators, hand grenades, and pistols in their possession. This event is completely missing in major Western media, but made the front page of the Mexican paper Diario on October 11, 2001, and other Mexican newspapers as well. It was also covered by the Voice of Atlan. The Mexican government issued a brief statement about the arrest at the time, which is preserved at the Internet Archive. Naturally, if you or I were caught carrying weapons while trying to enter a legislative assembly anywhere in the world, our fate would be sealed, and it would likely be short. But that's because we aren't employed by the Mossad, working for the Mossad, as was the case for Senior Smeck. Seems to have its perks, including a worldwide get-out-of-jail-free card. After some heavy-handed negotiations between Israel and Mexico's Secretary of Foreign Relations, Jorge Gutmann, the 2 Israelis were released. From the perspective of a typical person hypnotized by the TV, events seem to unfold according to a carefully crafted narrative that does not raise alarm. But the real world is far more complex, and a lot goes on behind the scenes that is unknown. The events at the Mexican Congress on October 10, 2001 provide an example of how the foreign policy of nations can be shaped through the very real act or threat of violence and death against its legislators. Does the story end there? No, according to the Voice of Atlan. This was just one part of the larger plot for Zionist partisans to exercise even greater control over Mexico. Now, supposedly, the Prime Minister at the time, Ariel Sharon, was actually responsible for getting these 2 terrorists off the hook. And he actually flew to Mexico personally. And here's a few quotes from the guy just to give you an idea of, what his personality's like. Every time we do something, you tell me America will do this and we'll do that. I want to tell you something very clear. Don't worry about American pressure on Israel. We, the Jewish people, control America, and the Americans know it. Here's another quote. I don't care what the American people think. I own the Congress. I don't mind if after the job is done you put me in front of a Nuremberg trial and then jail me for life. Hang me if you want, as a war criminal. What you don't understand is that the dirty work of Zionism is not yet finished. Far from it. And it goes on and on and on. Let's see. Israel is a wonderful country. It's a beautiful country. It's ours, but it's a country with 10,000 problems that we have to solve and deal. Talking about Arabs. You cannot like the word, but what is happening is an occupation to hold 3.5 million Palestinians under occupation. I believe that's a terrible thing for Israel and for the Palestinians. A lie should be tried in a place where it will attract the attention of the world. Yeah, so this guy right here, who's dead, he died in 2014 from being a fat piece of shit. He was in a coma, I think, from 2006 leading up to that, just from poor diet, among other things. But this guy was a very, very staunch Zionist, and he actually was a member of the Mossad all the way back at its founding. So like I said, he says he controls America, and America knows it. I don't care what the American people think. I own the Congress. Okay. Well, here's a document that you probably never saw before. It was published in October of 2001. It's entitled The Jewish Stake in America's Changing Demography, Reconsidering a Misguided Immigration Policy by Stephen Steinlight. Stephen Steinlight was the head of Center for Immigration Studies. I don't know if he still is. I believe he actually is still involved. But this is out of Washington, D.C., and this is an authentic document. This document is not up for debate. It is real. Why is that important? Well, it's a very damning and damaging document. You've probably heard of the Protocols of Zion, and you probably are being told or been told that it was a forgery, right? And that there's nothing real to it. It's just anti-Semitic garbage. Well, this right here is written by a Zionist in America, admitted. This is a real document. We have to establish that. It's very important. Let me scroll down. I believe it's on page 6. I haven't seen anyone else cover this document, and it's very, very important. This whole document addresses the threat or supposed perceived threat by American Jews that Latino immigrants pose because they think it will disrupt their political control in the United States. So this is a little section called Facing Up to the Gradual Demise of Jewish Political Power. Not that it is the case that our disproportionate political power, pound for pound the greatest of any ethnic cultural group in America, will erode all at once or even quickly. We will be able to hang on to it for perhaps a decade or two longer, unless and until the triumph of campaign finance reform is complete, an extremely unlikely scenario. The great material wealth of the Jewish community will continue to give it significant advantages. We will continue to court and be courted by key figures in Congress. What did Mr. Sharon say? Prime Minister. I don't care what the American people think. I own the Congress. Remember, this quote may not be valid, it might be fake, but this document is very real, and it was written by a Zionist. We will continue to court and be courted by key figures in Congress. That power is exerted within the political system from the local to national levels through soft money, and especially the provision of out-of-state funds to candidates sympathetic to Israel. A high wall of church-state separation and social liberalism combined with selective conservatism on criminal justice and welfare issues. Let me scroll down. For perhaps another generation, an optimistic forecast, the Jewish community is thus in a position where it will be able to divide and conquer and enter into selective coalitions that support our agendas. They just admitted to you that they want to use divide and conquer tactics in order to secure and advance their agendas. They also just admitted that they essentially buy members of our Congress. Even with these caveats, an era of astoundingly disproportionate Jewish legislative representation may have already peaked. It is unlikely we will ever see more than 10 Jewish members of the U.S. Senate at a time. And although, had Al Gore been allowed by the Supreme Court to assume office, a Jew would have been only one heartbeat away from the presidency. It may be, well, we'll never get that close again. With the changes in view, how long do we actually believe that nearly 80% of the entire foreign aid budget of the United States will go to Israel? 80% of the entire foreign aid budget of the United States goes to Israel. It is also important, or it is also true, that Jewish economic influence and power are disproportionately, there's that word again, concentrated in Hollywood, television, and in the news industry. So he just admitted that they buy members of our Congress and that they control Hollywood, television, and the news industry. Theoretically a boon in terms of the formation of public images of Jews and sensitizing the American people to issues of concern to Jews, but ethnic dominance in an industry does not by itself mean that these centers of opinion and attitude formation in the national culture are sources of Jewish political power. They are not noticeably Jewish in the sense of advancing a Jewish agenda, Jewish communal interest, or the cause of Israel. And television, the Jewish industry par excellence, with its shallow values, grotesque materialism, celebration of violence, utter superficiality, and anti-intellectualism and sexploitation, certainly does not advance anything that might be confused with Jewish values. It is probably true, however, that the situation would be worse in terms of the treatment of Jewish themes and issues in the media without this presence. So they admit they control Hollywood, they control the media, they control our Congress, and that Television, their biggest achievement, promotes shallow values, grotesque materialism, celebration of violence, superficiality, and anti-intellectualism, as well as sexploitation, and that it doesn't reflect their values, but they're the ones putting it out there for us to consume. And they admit that they use divide and conquer tactics to stay in control. This is a real document, guys. You can download it yourself. October 2001. Keep in mind, Ariel Sharon, the Prime Minister of Israel, at the time these attacks at the Mexican Congress occurred, and supposedly got these two guys off. I don't care what the American people think. I own the Congress. Every time you tell me to do something, you tell me America will do this and do that. I want to tell you something very clear. Don't worry about American pressure on Israel. We, the Jewish people, control America, and the Americans know it. Okay, so that leads me to this. One of the gentlemen arrested supposedly was named Saar Noam Ben-Zvi. He was 27 at the time. I can't find much information on this guy, but I believe I either found him or found a lead based off of him that may be unrelated. So when I tried to search this guy, I popped up with Noam Ben-Zvi. He's the CEO of a company called Placer.AI. And basically what that is the largest company in the United States that tracks foot traffic data and basically combines that into one big database using telephone location, mobile phone location, and they can track everywhere you go, where you've been, how long you've been there, etc. And they use that and sell that data to other, marketing firms and things, supposedly so they can track, sales and all this and that. But it is the largest company in the United States that does that. Remember that Fox News report that you saw at the beginning showing that Israel was in charge of the biggest phone billing for the United States, the contract. Converse Infosys was the name of the company, which was wiretapping and spying on DEA agents, etc. One of those companies was operating out of Israel in the United States. This company operates out of Israel in the United States. I don't know if this Noam Ben-Zvi is the same guy who was arrested in October of 2001, but I do know that he was Israeli intelligence, and most likely is still Israeli intelligence. I'm going to go ahead and say this guy is an active Mossad agent in the United States. How do I know he was Israeli intelligence? Well, when you scroll down his LinkedIn profile, you see right here, October 2002 to October 2009. He was a data science team leader. It just says 8200. Well, what is 8200? Unit 8200 is an Israeli intelligence core unit of the Israeli Defense Forces, responsible for collecting signal intelligence and code decryption. Military publications include references to Unit 8200 as the central collection unit of the Intelligence Corps, and it is sometimes referred to as Israeli SIGINT, National Unit. It is subordinate to Amman, the Military Intelligence Directorate. So this unit is proven and documented to be an Israeli intelligence information gathering unit. This guy, by his own admission, used to work for them. And yes, I know that IDF service is compulsory in Israel, but this guy is an exception. Why is he an exception? Well, look at his website right here. You've got him as the CEO and co-founder. And this guy, Kobe Ben-Zvi, who I'm assuming is his father, has an interesting history of his own. Mr. Kobe Ben-Zvi, this is a profile off of Magma Venture Partners, which is basically a portfolio of different CEOs and entrepreneurs that they keep. Jacob Kobe Ben-Zvi has been the vice president and general manager of PMC Sierra's wireless infrastructure and networking division since November 2010. Mr. Ben-Zvi has over 30 years of experience in the technology industry. He joined PMC Sierra in 2010 through the acquisition of Magma portfolio company Wintegra Inc. So he founded Wintegra, which owns Magma portfolio. So that's why he's on this site. Which he founded in 2000 and served as the president, CEO, and chairman of the board of directors since its inception. Prior to founding Wintegra, Mr. Ben-Zvi was at Motorola since 1982, where he held numerous positions at Motorola and its affiliated companies, including tenure as co-general manager of the Networking and Communication Systems Division, director of Networking and Computing Core Technology Development, business unit manager at Motorola Semiconductor Product Sector's networking and communications operations. In his early years at Motorola, Mr. Ben-Zvi built and managed the design team responsible for Motorola's communications processors. So this guy right here is about as deep as it gets. He's been involved in the basic hardware components that are actually, put into our phones, our computers, etc. So this guy has an established history of being in this field for years, and he also has a degree from Tel Aviv University, and he supposedly lives in New York. He's a dual citizen of Israel and the United States. So is Noam. I don't know if they live in the United States currently, but they are dual citizens of Israel and the United States. Mr. Noam himself is like a computer prodigy. He actually graduated college from the research I could find on the guy at the age of 13. So he's like one of those tech savvy dudes, and he's running one of the biggest data collection businesses in the United States, and it's a company that has offices in Israel as well. So this guy, just like Converse Infosys, the company that the government used to do phone billing and other stuff, that were in charge of like wiretapping and everything for our government agencies leading up to 9/11 and being compromised by an Israeli spy ring, this company is essentially doing the same thing. This is the leading producer of foot traffic data and tracking based off mobile location. So if they have all that information, are you going to tell me that this guy isn't an Israeli operative? He's too valuable not to be. He's admittedly a former intelligence agent for the IDF. His father, arguably, probably got him into it. Could be his handler, who knows. But yeah, this guy, computer prodigy, graduated college at 13, admittedly, like I said, an intelligence operative for the IDF, running one of the biggest mobile tracking companies and data aggregates, like aggregators, whatever you want to call it, in the United States, with experience with data mining. He's a data mining expert. This guy is someone you need to watch out for. And also, they just released a COVID retail impact tracker. So like I said, they can track any mall, any store in the country, and find out who goes in there, how often, how long they're in there, just spying on you through your phone using your location data. I mean, even their symbol is the location symbol with an owl on it. The esoteric meaning of the owl, I'm not going to get into that, but I mean, this should scare you that this company, which is operated out of Israel and the United States, run by people who are former intelligence officers in the IDF, these guys are probably Mossad.
Placer.AI delivers unprecedented visibility into consumer foot traffic to drive your business forward. We harness data from millions of mobile devices to capture billions of store visits, enabling anyone to access a 360-degree view of any location. The Placer.AI dashboard provides real-time insights into audiences and competition, allowing you to discover new business opportunities. Get accurate foot traffic counts and dwell time. Aggregate by weekly or monthly visits. Discover true trade areas where customers live and work. Filter by frequent customers, day of week, and demographics. Know where customers are coming from and going to, and along which routes they travel. Analyze customer profiles, income, gender, where they eat, shop, and spend time outside the center. Benchmark performance against local or distant competitors, providing true transparency into market share and competitive advantages. Our advanced analytics shed light into cross-shopping, event analysis, share of time, churn, and much more, helping you build data-driven strategies. Placer.AI, with unprecedented visibility, anyone in the retail industry can be brilliant at running their business.
So another thing that I find odd is when I tried to find out when Placer Labs was founded, when Placer.AI and all those companies were started from it. Apparently it was started in Delaware in 2014. Now, Delaware, I understand, is a tax haven for businesses, so I guess maybe this isn't out of the ordinary, but the registered agent information is the company corporation. It's kind of a weird name. But yeah, this is the company, the parent company of Placer.AI. And when I go to Placer.AI's own website, this is the address that they give for the main office. 153 2nd Street in Los Altos, California. Problem is, when I look up 153 2nd Street in Los Altos, California, I get a dance studio, I get a Taylor Rentals apartment, I think, complex property management agency and apartments above. Now, I don't see an office for supposedly the biggest mobile phone tracker and foot traffic tracker company in the United States worth over $12 million. I don't see an office here at all. In fact, I just see, looks like to be nothing. And then when I go to this website, pitchbook.com, which is like a website that hosts different company bios and profiles, you can find information on this. It says its primary office is 340 South Lemon Avenue, Suite 1277. So when you type in 340 South Lemon Avenue, Walnut, California, this is what you get. You get a storage unit in the middle of nowhere, which I thought was weird. Then, if you go to Bizopedia, which is almost like PitchBook, same idea, it gives yet another address, 271 Mullen Ave, San Francisco. When you look up 271 Mullen Ave, San Francisco, this is what you get. This weird pink house. Again, doesn't look like the offices of a corporation. I find all of that weird. I do know, and again, this is the same company, Noam Ben-Zvi, officer, 271 Mullen Ave. Same dude. And they also have an office in Israel, which I believe is this location right here. Yeah, why is it popping up as being in like a storage unit, this weird pink house, the rental property? I find that all weird. Now, what led me down this rabbit hole to begin with was researching the attempted bombing of the Mexican Congress in 2001, in which 2 Israelis were arrested October 10th, one of them named Saar Noam Ben-Zvi. When you take that name and you put it in on Google, the first result you get is the article that I pulled the name from, and the second would be the LinkedIn profile to the CEO of Placer.AI that I showed you earlier. Placer.AI being the largest real-time foot traffic tracker based off mobile location data in the United States, operated out of the United States and Israel. I can confirm that he was Israeli intelligence as early as October 2002 and as late as October 2009. Now, in order for him to have been the same guy who did these alleged attempted attacks, he would have had to have been 27 at the time, which would make him about 46 now. When I click this photo, this does not look like a 46-year-old man. In fact, he looks about 30, I'd say, right? Okay, so his LinkedIn profile photo, he looks about 30. I was able to find his Facebook. On his Facebook profile, which, by the way, is his active Facebook as recently as May 17th, 2019. That's the last post he has. This photo, same guy, looks to be about 32, 33, I'd say, right? Another funny thing, though, on his Facebook, he has no mention whatsoever of the multi-million-dollar company that he's the CEO and co-founder of. Instead, I see a nothing exact marketing business, which isn't even active anymore as far as I can tell. I was able to look up the address. I did call this number. I did get in contact with a woman who seemed very evasive and weird. And this address, by the way, 22967 Woodward Ave, Ferndale, Michigan, is the address of a business that sells desserts. Has nothing to do with whatever exact marketing is. Now, this is a multi-million-dollar company. Like I said, the biggest real-time foot traffic tracker based off mobile location data, apparently in the world. And they sell that stuff to other businesses and they use it as a model. Now, this guy looks about 30 in this photo. In his Facebook, looks about 32, 33. So how old is this photo? Can we tell when this photo was taken? Well, I was able to do some digging, and I found this, gamedev.stackexchange.com. Same guy, same photo as his Facebook, but in order to tell how old that photo is, I can use this. Tells me here his last login date was April 12th, 2014. That means that this photo he's using currently on his Facebook, which again is active as early as last year, is at least 6 years old. because the last login on this site was 2014, which would mean that this photo at minimum has to be at least 6 years old. Could it be older than that? Absolutely. Like I said, in order for him to be the same guy who was arrested in Mexico, he would have had to have been 27 at the time, which would make him about 46 now. Doesn't look 46 in this photo. Doesn't look 46 in this photo. In fact, he's using photos that are older, and we can confirm they're older. So why is he using photos of him younger? It's like he wants to give you the impression that he's younger than he is, right? At least in my opinion. Again, too, why does he have no mention of the multi-million-dollar company that he's the founder and CEO of on his Facebook? The Facebook, which is active currently, as late as last year, right? So, yeah, I found this photo of him. This is the most recent photo I could find of him if you go on DuckDuckGo or Google Images. This is about the most recent one you can find. In this photo, I'd say he looks about 45, 46. What would you say? Doesn't look like a 30-something-year-old guy to me. That looks about 45, 46. I'm pretty accurate, pretty certain in that estimation. Also, when you look at his father, Noam Ben-Zvi, this guy looks like he's in his 70s, which would probably mean that the latest he had his kid was in his 30s, which would put this guy in his 40s. Like I said, he's using a photo that's at least 6 years old on his Facebook, a Facebook which doesn't mention the business that he's the founder and CEO of. That's weird. Anyone else think that's weird? Is this the same guy who was arrested in Mexico in 2001? We can confirm, like I said, he was Israeli intelligence. He's an expert in data mining. He's the CEO and head of a company who's the largest cell phone location tracker in the United States, operating out of Israel too. Just like that, business Converse Infosys, which was in charge of all the wiretapping and phone billing prior to 9/11, which was run out of Israel. This guy graduated college at 13. He's apparently the supercomputer tech whiz, and his father has, according to Magma Venture Partners, which was owned by Wintegra, the company his father founded in 2000, has over 40 years of experience. Even going back to the early 80s, developing Motorola's communications processors. So this guy has spook written all over him. So does his son. This guy. Is it the same guy from 2001? I can't confirm that. Am I pretty sure? Yeah, I am pretty sure. Am I willing to say that this guy is active Israeli intelligence? Yes, I am willing to say that. I'm willing to say that. I think he is operating Mossad currently in the United States or living in Israel, but he's definitely Israeli intelligence, and he's definitely going under the radar. No one seems to be talking about this guy or his father. Like I said, he is former Israeli intelligence, data science team leader for Unit 8200 as early as October 2002. The incident in Mexico occurred October 2001. He's using outdated photos on his Facebook. Like I said, the most recent photo I can find of this guy, he looks about 46, 47, which is how old he would have to be in order to be the same guy who was arrested in Mexico in 2001. I think this guy's a spook. I think this is an active Mossad operation to gather intelligence, based off our location data and other things, and use that against us. Also, they came out with a COVID-19 tracking app to basically track, the effect on retail stores from the lockdowns and things like that. In my opinion, this could also be sold to contact tracers, right? They're going to have people who come to your door and say, hey, based off cell phone location data, we think you've been in contact with someone who may, or may not have tested positive for COVID-19. You might have been exposed. This guy, Israel, the company the country that this company operates out of, as well as the United States, they could be doing that and giving the information to contact tracers. Who knows? But this guy, I think he's Mossad. I think this is an active intelligence gathering operation in the United States, and I think this company should be put under a microscope. I think people should look into it. I think people should look into Saar Noam Ben-Zvi. I think people should look into his father, Kobe. I think these guys are spooks. I think these guys are active intelligence for Israel, operating in the United States, going undercover, and no one seems to notice or no one seems to care. I'm willing to put myself out there and say these guys are intelligence agents actively. Look into it. I could be wrong. I don't think I am. I think a lot of the stuff I've uncovered is pretty compelling. We have all the Israeli art students leading up to 2 years, as early as 4 years, operating in the United States prior to the September 11th terrorist attacks. You had art students not renting, but being allowed inside of the World Trade Center buildings up to 4 years before to do an art project. The person who owned the Twin Towers leased it from the New York Port Authority, Larry Silverstein, a Zionist. The guy who gave them the security passes, Jules Kroll, Nick Kroll's father of Kroll Security Services, another Zionist. The company who was in charge, Converse Infosys, of all the billing and phone billing and telecommunications wiretapping before 9/11, run by Israel. This company operating out of Israel, collecting real-time cell phone intelligence on us and location tracking. I think this guy's a spook.